I'm Ethan Gordon, and I'm the president of the Institute of Ecological Agriculture, which is a cooperative of farmers and educators and consultants and ecologists who are interested in regenerating agricultural landscapes and bringing an ecological worldview into agriculture and agricultural education. I'm also a researcher in regenerative agriculture as well, but more specifically regenerative ranching in the US, and I work for Oregon State University, but I live here in Australia, and grew up on a farm or a ranch grazing cattle, rotationally grazing. We have about 800 head and still doing that as well, and that's on the lands of the Gumbaynggirr, Dangari and Arwon people in northern New South Wales. And that's probably me in a nutshell, those three facets. I did my PhD with the Institute for Sustainable Futures looking at regenerative agriculture and the movement of regenerative agriculture and how different groups in that movement are interpreting regenerative agriculture and what it is differently. They come from different lineages like holistic management or permaculture or organics or biodynamics or agroecology. How did I get here? I grew up on a ranch and was always really connected to the landscape, but never interested in agriculture because it felt like two very different things and almost felt like the relationship with the land that I had as a kid was not compatible with our agricultural practices and activities, which were more industrial, and so I wasn't really attracted to that. But then I started studying complexity sort of theory and systems thinking, which changed the way I thought about our agriculture and how it could operate. The thing that I'm most passionate about is bringing biodiversity back into landscapes and that healthy functioning of landscapes at a landscape scale, really broadly, not just on individual farms. And as a part of that, also cultural diversity, because landscapes are not just ecological and biological, they're also cultural. And in Australia, we've had, over 300 different Indigenous nations, and similarly over 425 or something Indigenous languages, which have co-evolved with the different landscapes in Australia. So all of that is part of regeneration. I don't think you can regenerate country without also regenerating culture. So I'm interested in that, biocultural regeneration. Soil is very significant in regenerative agriculture, but it's one part of a broader system. And you need to be able to appreciate the role that soil plays in all of that, but also the role that water plays and all of these other ecological functions. There's a risk, I think, of focusing too much on carbon and soil and not the other parts of the systems, and then you get this sort of carbon tunnel vision and you're trying to quantify carbon, but it's bigger than that. It's about how we see the land and what our relationship is to it. And so we need to change what happens in our minds and as well as what is happening in the landscapes. We say regenerative agriculture as if it's a noun and it's a thing. And in Europe and other places, they're really starting to get around these principles of regenerative agriculture where you have to integrate livestock, as an example, or other things to all regenerative agriculture systems. But that's not at all how I look at regenerative agriculture. What I'm actually interested in is regenerating agriculture and bringing this concept of regeneration, which is not just happening in agriculture, it's happening in broader sectors as well, like economics and health and tourism, regenerative tourism. How we bring that concept into an agricultural context, and what does that mean? So we need to regenerate our agricultural landscapes, which is a big part of it, but we also need to regenerate our agricultural institutions, because we don't have institutions that are fit for the kind of agriculture that we need in order to heal the planet. And then we're also regenerating, like I said earlier, the cultural side. It's like agriculture as opposed to agribusiness, which is not a word that I like personally. It's a very human thing, agriculture, and it's about how we relate to other species, and so we need to bring that into it as well. So yeah, I can't remember what your question was, but But yeah, regenerative, it's about regenerating. It's not about regenerative agriculture. So the Institute of Ecological Agriculture is the group here that is at this retreat. And it's got a long history now. It started out with the Bachelor of Ecological Agriculture at Charles Sturt University, which was one of the first agricultural degrees in the country that really started to look at this ecological way and environmental way of doing agriculture, instead of just the typical industrial approach. And it was shut down in 2017, and the Institute of Ecological Ag formed just prior to that to try and safeguard the knowledge of that degree virtually. And then after that closed, we ended up writing the Bachelor of Science majoring in regenerative agriculture at Southern Cross University. So our history has been a lot about that sort of pedagogical, learning about agriculture and the education side. And more recently, we've started to branch into developing this accreditation program, which is about trying to have a community of practice around the knowledge to regenerate landscapes and communities, and get those people really talk to each other, and as a base to then advise on the development of more university degrees or other things like that, so that we can get and consult the farmers and that sort of thing, so we can get more of this way of thinking about agriculture out into the mainstream and into industry, and have a solid group of people who can actually advise farmers transitioning to regenerative agriculture or some other, call it what you will, more ecological and environmental approach to agriculture. So yeah, that's what we are. Of course, if we're just talking about regenerating landscapes, then the thing that's probably blocking it predominantly is, and it'll be different in Australia than it is in the US, but it's people's prior beliefs about the right way to do something that they've inherited from past generations. People may not be so open to changing. They may just be doing what they've always done. Sometimes it can be hard. It's also things though like not having any support at an institutional level from, no like real policy support for regenerative agriculture, or like not good media on regenerative agriculture, people not really caring or talking about this stuff, and that comes from the big influence of corporations that are invested in industrial agriculture, having access to politicians and funding media organizations that have their own agenda basically, and so it's hard to change that system when actually what you're doing is trying to take power away from someone or a corporation or something that already has that power in the system. So moving power and redistributing it is always difficult. If you wanted to go further with what regenerative ag means and start talking about regeneration of the food system, and then you're starting to talk about issues of power and inequity in the food system, which is a broader issue, and that is going to have a whole suite of other challenges. Because if you just want to regenerate landscapes, it's pretty easy for people who are already, wealthy landowners, or not wealthy landowners, but, landowners who just have that land, and then you're just trying to convince them to think differently. But if you want to fix the food system, you also need to think about other issues, like that some groups don't have access to land, or that that land was stolen from Indigenous people. And there's a lot of regenerative farmers who get far enough down the regenerative track that they start thinking, well, hang on, like what do we do about Indigenous sovereignty and the fact that all of these Indigenous people were displaced from this land that we're trying to regenerate, and they also have a cultural connection to this place, and they're not getting any benefit from the land. There was a farmer that I interviewed for my PhD who compared the regenerative agriculture movement to the gay liberation movement, and they said that what you had at the beginning of that movement was a lot of really radical people who who were probably non-binary or trans and didn't want to conform to the dominant way of being in society. And then you had a lot of other people, like, you know, more gay people, lesbians and everything, come into that movement, and it transformed into the marriage equality movement. Even though the beginning was really radical, but then it sort of calmed down into a marriage equality movement, potentially even got watered down. And then all the people who, you know, eventually marriage equality was passed, and all the people who were, you know, gay and just wanted to get married were like, great, we got what we wanted, and then they sort of tapped out of the movement. But then the trans and non-binary people who were there at the very beginning still didn't really get anything that they'd wanted in the first place. You know, they were just still facing the same challenges. So the risk in regenerative agriculture is that the people who are the most privileged are going to benefit first, and the question is, are they then going to just like be happy with what they've gotten, or are they going to stick around and keep fighting for the people who haven't benefited yet, you know, and you know, want things like Indigenous sovereignty as an example. Yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting comparison, and one that's probably pretty fair.